What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I do want to start doing a couple of tests on this car today and finally getting into it a little bit. We're going to take this on just a super quick test drive down the road. I don't really want to get on this car at all. I don't know enough about it and it's been sitting a really long time, so I'm definitely not going to push it or do anything crazy with it. It's more so just to kind of show you guys what we have, that it runs and drives. We can see inside here too, as we look at this engine bay in here, there's a lot of these intercooler piping hoses are all super dry, cracked, worn, and just old stuff in here. And everything needs a good solid look over and cleaning in order to kind of refreshen and repair this engine bay up to where it can be. I'm sure that there's probably some vacuum leaks and whatnot going on in here with this car. I'm gonna go take this on a quick test drive down the road. We're just gonna throw our battery cable on here, and then I also did get one of these vacuum plugs right on here. We're gonna throw this onto this so that way it doesn't have any big vacuum boost leaks on here, and we should be all set here once we get this terminal on. I'll start the car up, we'll give it a cold start, and then we're just gonna take it on a super quick test drive. Just kind of show you guys it does drive, see if we run into any issues. Okay, we do have power, which is great. The gas is super low. The light did just come on. I'm gonna give you just a cold start real quick. You can see our gas light's on, so we're gonna really get going here. We do have oil pressure. Right now it's in the middle. It's on a cold start, so it should start off pretty high up there. We'll make sure our temp gauge is reading on here. Currently we are idling at right around 1500 RPMs. Let's go ahead and throw this into gear, and we'll go ahead and take it down the road here. So we just went into second gear and third gear. Everything went okay. We're just cruising low speed, about 20 miles an hour. Seems to be working pretty good so far. Not really any crazy noises. It does sound like the brakes are making a little bit of noise. We don't have any check lights up on my dash right now either. Looks like our temperature gauge is starting to operate right now. That means that's working. Oil pressure is still right about in the middle. We'll try to give it a little bit of gas here, see if our boost gauge picks up anything. Let's try it here. There we go. Let's go into third gear here. All right. Clutch feels really interesting. It's super light up until it hits the bottom where it kind of starts to grab, and then it gets really heavy. These stock clutches are not the greatest in my opinion, but they work. Car is honestly surprisingly pretty quiet for it being a single shot exhaust. The exhaust note is not that loud at all. But surprisingly, this thing does run and it does drive, which is more than I can say about a lot of these other VR4s that are still out there. The car was just fighting me a little bit, trying to get it into gear. It does seem like that idle wants to drop really low, almost like it wants to stall. Now I know there's issues with both the throttle cable and the vacuum, but I'm just gonna get this car back so that way I don't get stranded here. I just made it back, and as soon as I got it in the drive, we did just stall out. Now I know that there's definitely an idle issue going on with this car. I knew that originally when I got it. The throttle cable itself seems like it needs a little bit of adjusting there. I'd also guarantee there's vacuum leaks going on with all these intercooler pipes. Good news is it does run, it does drive. It's able to go through the gears. I just showed you guys on camera. It went through a couple different gears. Obviously, I'm not going crazy with this or trying to like hit boost right now. The car is definitely not ready for that. This idle issue needs to get figured out on the car. And then I'm also going to show you guys real quick. This car does have an interesting thing going on with reverse gear. It has a reverse gear grind and also a pop out. Now this is a 6-speed transmission for the 98 VR4, and it sounds like it's a pretty common issue with these for reverse to have issues with either grinding or popping out. And it could be attributed to really quite a few different things, but more than likely it's probably going to be internal, because it seems like that's what it usually is. I'm just going to show you guys real quick and replicate it. I don't want to do this a lot because it sounds absolutely terrible, but you can definitely hear this grind. So I'm going to start the car up, we're going to throw it into reverse, and you should be able to catch it on audio from the inside of the car here. All right, make sure we can actually idle here. So let's throw this into reverse, if I can even get it into reverse. Okay, so we're in reverse. Give it some gas, try to go back. You can see it wanting to pop out. So it just popped out of gear right there. Let me try to get it to grind here. Okay, you can hear that right there. I'm not gonna sit here and try to force it and get it to make this noise. Bottom line, you guys kind of just saw it pop out by itself. Now I can manually hold it in, but the issue is if I do that, it'll still make that grinding noise sometimes. Reverse does work, it's intermittent. Sometimes it grinds on this. It needs to be broken down and torn into. There's really only one more thing that I want to do here. Obviously, I'm going to end up disassembling and tearing all this down. Now, I'm going to have to pull the motor, I'm going to have to pull the trans, and really everything in this entire bay on the car. Before I go ahead and do that, since it's still into the car right now, I do want to run just a compression test on this car really quickly. This is just going to tell us kind of what the overall health is of each one of our cylinders for this motor. I've never used one of these testers before, but because of the mileage on this car, I feel like it's kind of necessary. I do plan to hopefully push this car and mod it a little bit, and I just want to make sure that I have a good solid setup before I start doing anything crazy. Here is the compression tester kit that I got. I just got this off of Amazon, super cheap. This should be a pretty easy test to perform on the car. Now there's really only two things that I'm going to do that I've seen for us to pretty much cut fuel on this car so it doesn't start when we run the compression test. We're gonna come over here to the timing cover side. Normally there would be a timing cover right here, and right on the outside we have these sensors right over here. This should be your crank position sensor right here. We're gonna unplug this and pull it so your car will not start. Now, in addition to doing that, we're also gonna come over here to the fuse box, open this up, and we have a ECI 20 amp little fuse right here. We're gonna come in here and we're gonna pull this one out as well. The first 3 cylinders right here on the front bank are very easy to get to. And then we also have the other cylinders back here underneath the intake plenum. Now everybody freaks out and acts like this is the hardest thing in the world to take off, and it's really, there's not that much to it. There's only a couple bolts pretty much here in the front and maybe a couple brackets in the back, and then you got to pull your throttle body. We will start right here with number 1. We're just going to take this, kind of twist it back and forth in order to break this loose, and then we can go ahead and pull this one out. Well, that's interesting. The actual internals of the spark plug right here are stuck right there inside. So let's try this one right here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this one, if we look down in here, this one's normal. You can see the spark plug. This one, you can see that piece, and that should be inside of here. Now we're gonna need to get in here with some pliers and pull that off of the actual spark plug. We're just gonna pull our plug out here real quick. See what kind of plugs we're running here. Here is our first plug that we just pulled out here. It's actually a little bit hot still, but this is a NGK BKR 6EGP. That's what the part number is on it. It does look fairly new, which is pretty good. We might end up running these. We're just gonna take this right here, size this up to the correct size here. I believe it's this one. I just looked at the threads. It looks like the threads match, and also the diameter. So we're gonna pull this one out. We'll pull our gauge out and our actual tester part right here and just piece everything together. Here's what we got. We have the gauge, we have the hose, and then we have the correct adapter fitting here. So we're just gonna thread this into the actual spark plug well. Make sure that it does indeed thread in. All right, get this hand tight, and then we'll crank the car over and see what happens. Now that this is all hooked up into our cylinder here, we're gonna just set the gauge up. I'll set up the GoPro here so we can watch what this is doing when I do crank this over. Before we do that, we need to talk about what numbers we should be seeing on this actual reader. Now, according to Supercar Engineering, who has a lot of good information on these cars and also the forums, the range you're gonna be looking for is between 115 PSI and 156. That's gonna be the range for the 6G72 VR4 motors. And the difference between all cylinders should be within 14 pounds. We're gonna be looking for that range between 115 and 156. I'm gonna keep track here with just a little notebook. I have all my cylinders numbered out here. So we're gonna test every single one, get all of our numbers, write them all out, and make sure that we're within range. We're gonna test cylinder 1 here. So we're gonna go ahead, crank this over, and see what we're gonna hit on our gauge here. Good. Looks like we're hitting just under 150. Probably right around 144 or so. So this cylinder seems to be very good. We're gonna test the other ones here. Test on cylinder number 3. Let's crank it. Right around 130. Cylinder number 5. Looks like we're showing right around 118, I would say. I'm now gonna pull off our intake plenum here, get our throttle body off, and all of our brackets that are needed to pull this off. I'm not gonna show that on video because I'm sure I'm probably gonna get to that eventually in another video, but we will get to the rear bank and I'll show you what those compression numbers are on our tester. This is gonna be cylinder number 2. We're just over 150, rated around 155, we'll call it. We'll move on to the next one here. This one's gonna be cylinder 4. This is showing about 150 right on the dot. Our last cylinder, cylinder 6, we're all set up here. The other thing too is all of these spark plugs look pretty consistent across the board. They all look pretty good and new. Do our last test here and we'll compare our results momentarily. Now we can get our intake manifold back on here. A couple things to note. I did notice that the throttle body did not have a gasket in place right here where this goes to your intake manifold. Also, the throttle body, right where this plate connects onto the manifold, these bolts are both stripped in the actual plenum. I'll go show you that here real quick when we get this intake on. These are the bolts that are stripped out on this bracket. This one only gets about 2 threads, and then this one is a little bit longer and it has a nut on the bottom side holding this. This one doesn't thread at all because it's got a nut on the bottom that's actually threaded. This whole entire throttle cable just needs to be kind of gone through and make sure that everything operates and functions properly. This is either going to have to be drilled and tapped in order to get this to work, or we could also just put nuts on the bottom side. Either way could work. We'll take a look at our compression ratio numbers. The other thing too as well, inside of our actual one of our turbo pipes here, you can see we have a little bit of oil. This can be indicative of potentially blown turbos, but it's also not super uncommon. I don't plan on running these TD04 9Bs in here. We're gonna change them out anyways. We're gonna test this front bank cylinder here, cylinder number 5, one more time because it did seem to test a little bit lower than all the other ones. I just wanna make sure that we try to give this another test here just to kind of confirm what it is actually doing. Looks like we did bump up a little bit here. So right now we're closer to 125. The compression testing is all completed with all cylinders across the board. Here is our results. The lowest one on here was gonna be cylinder number 5, which is going to be this one. I tested it a couple times. I was able to get 125. I know that the range that you want is you don't want anything to be further than 14 pounds apart from each other. Obviously, there's a little bit of discrepancy with that. I think the biggest range that we have is going to be right around 30, I would say, is the furthest one that we have. But a majority of these across the board are actually pretty close. And the main purpose of this test is just to see if we're getting adequate or an appropriate amount of compression. I'm not going to tear this motor down and rebuild it. I was just mostly doing this just to make sure that everything looks to be somewhat decent and normal. And I also don't even know how accurate that gauge actually is. It was pretty cheap. I'd be willing to bet if you hook that thing up and tested it a couple times on a single cylinder, you'd probably get a different number every single time that you ran it. Now that we're done with the compression test, and that's pretty much going to conclude this video, what we're going to be doing next is pretty much we're going to be pulling the whole motor out of here with the transmission, get everything out, and pretty much clear up this bay and free everything up. Thanks for tuning in. Like and subscribe and keep up with the series.